And there's an intelligence inside all of us that we can talk to, that we can converse with at any time we want to. Like, we always have a choice in how we relate to the challenge, because you could meet an argument with someone by screaming right back at the person, or you could get calm. You can meet their gaze.
Sarah was born with extrasensory abilities. From early childhood, she would watch the little glowing angel lights that would dance above her bed as she fell asleep. Her first experience channeling a spiritual being came at 15 years old, and from then on she became aware of spirits of all kinds, but did not know how to control or quiet her gift. She was confused and even a little frightened, and so she shut it all out. Over the next several years, she spiraled into a deep depression. Her stubborn insistence that she would not believe in the spirit world only served to dull her gifts. She attracted incredible challenges, including abusive relationships. Her life was riddled with anxiety, panic attacks, and addiction. At her lowest point, she was given the message to call to the angels for help. The stubborn non-believer in her laughed at the idea, but one night, when she was so paralyzed with fear that she felt like she was drowning, she called to the angels for help. Suddenly, her room was glowing with white light. A tall, luminescent figure stood at the edge of her bed with golden wings and a sword of light. Archangel Michael chased away the presence of all darkness and fear from her being. From that day forward, she began to experience a journey of miraculous healing. With the angels by her side, she learned to hone her gifts so she could use them in a balanced way to both serve and lead. She overcame the patterns of addiction, abuse, depression, and fear in her life. So we find ourselves here today with this amazing woman whose choice to embark with an open heart on her journey over 10 years ago has been the catalyst for healing and growth for countless clients and followers worldwide. In those 10 years working as an international spiritual teacher, angel channeler, and beloved YouTuber, she's shared her gifts across 25 countries, gained almost 4 million views on YouTube, but most importantly, has created real change in the lives of her followers.
Welcome, Sarah. It's really great to have you here.
Thank you so
on my channel.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here.
Yeah. So the reason I began with your story is because your background frames exactly what I want to talk about, and that is that we all have that innate power to evolve through challenges and through struggles and through trials. And life is never going to stop presenting us those struggles. It's sort of part of the reality of life on earth. So your story, like so many others, so many great myths and legends, can truly inspire people, and you can see that it is possible. You can grow through such loss and suffering, but sometimes inspiration isn't enough. We need to know exactly how do we become aware of what's going on within us, like our thoughts and our emotions.
Yes. So one thing that I always like to work on in my own path as a spiritual student, and to encourage others to do as well, is to develop mindfulness of what's going on in our consciousness, because it can often be very easy for us to kind of default to certain modes of thinking and feeling, and certain patterns of behavior, because they're the patterns that we learned growing up and that we, always, again, defaulted to over time. And it can feel in that way that life almost controls us, or that our emotions almost control us, or that when something bad happens, we just react, that kind of thing. When we develop a sense of mindfulness, basically that means that we become aware of what we are contributing to our conscious reality. And it helps us to realize that we've got choice and control over those things. So it's not that our thoughts and emotions are running our lives for us. We get to choose what we do with them. And that's where great creative power comes from. There's this old alchemical saying from the alchemists of old, these ancient philosopher type, spiritual types, and they would say, as above, so below. As below, so above, as within, so without. So we can sort of understand the way that reality from this way of thinking exists in the way that it originates from God or from source, in saying that, well, it originates from thought, because everything that originates in our own lives is first thought, is first imagined, is first conceived of in the mind, at the level of consciousness. The same is true of source energy. So our thoughts create everything. Thoughts are incredibly powerful. A thought begins great movements and great change. And when you put it that way, or when you think of it that way, that it's like, when I think I'm acting the way that God intended me to, or that this higher power, enacts when it creates worlds. When we think of it that way, we empower ourselves greatly to realize that, yeah, my thoughts really do something.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can get conscientious about choosing thoughts that I would intentionally like to see show up in my reality, that reflect an energy or a vibration or an attitude or a value or a standard that reflects what I would like to create and see in my reality, then great things can happen. Then I'm really stepping into my creative power, and I really am expressing as if I were created in God's image.
Yeah.
Because you are. You're created in God's image, and God is created in your image. It's it's a truth. So yeah, I think that thoughts, as you said, yes, they're the beginning of that empowerment for sure.
Yes. So thoughts in the beginning. So what the frustrating thing is, and I guess that a lot of people get frustrated, is when they begin that mindfulness practice and they go into meditation, they seem to be doing all the right things. They find that their thoughts are quite negative, draining space to be in, and you can get quite frustrated yourself, and I guess that creates more anxiety of, am I doing it right, am I doing it wrong? Like, when you look at your inner world, you don't find the nicest things. You find judgment, you find resentment, you find anxiety and regrets and guilt. And what happens there when you go in and you find this ugliness and then you want to run away? What do you do there?
Yes. Instead of running from it, I think that the best possible thing that we can do is to face it head on. So that gets us right into, I guess, what I would call is the crux of what people call shadow work.
Yeah.
And it is to face these unconscious, or we'll say even conscious but negative, kinds of thoughts, these things that don't look so good, and to get very honest about them, to become very honest and authentic, and hold yourself responsible in some way. Not that you guilt yourself, certainly, but to the extent that you're willing to look within and say, this negative thought, belief system, attitude, mood that I'm holding, it comes from somewhere. It didn't come from nothing. I chose it somewhere down the line. I chose it. So if we can retrace the steps of that negative thought and look for how it's rooted in our consciousness, then we can learn a lot about ourselves and take our power back, from any situations in which we had felt as if those difficulties, challenging feelings or thoughts had steamrolled us or made life difficult. We take responsibility for them and we turn towards them, we face them, we get honest about them, even if it hurts. Because the more that we see these things and we realize, this negative belief is not me. That's not my real identity. I am not a story that I'm telling about myself. I'm not the thought that I'm thinking right now. I'm not the mood that I have right now. I'm something that's deep and eternal and expansive. And I get to decide how I express, what container I put myself in, how my energy interacts with the world. So shadow work is really just, it's self-empowerment. It's willingness to look in the mirror at those negative kinds of things, to face them head on, and not to let even a single one of them slip through the cracks. I think it can be really tempting to do that. Let's say, especially if we're angry about something, a lot of us want to fly into judgment and be like, what he said was that was not good, and I didn't like, it feels good. It feels, there's a part of our ego that loves the way that it feels. It's so self-indulgent.
Make someone else wrong.
Yes, to feel like we're right and something else is wrong. It makes us seem, it's the illusion of feeling as if it seems like we're in power when we have that sense of control that we have when we feel fudge something. But the trick is that that's not real power. It's like a fleeting, a kind of feeling that actually does the opposite. It kind of disempowers us because it says that my power comes from something that's very conditional. It comes from being right. So the instant I'm not right, or some relative comes into the situation that knocks me off of my pedestal of rightness, then we suddenly lose our sense of empowerment. So we have to find our empowerment from something that's eternal, that's not a temporary, changing, conditional kind of thing. We have to find it from something that's unconditional. And one of my favorite things that is an unconditional power that we have is love. It's self-love. Self-love and love that is the kind of the core spark of what our consciousness comes from. Because if you're willing to do shadow work to the extent that like you can trace these negative thoughts all the way down to their core, then you can do that with any piece of consciousness, any feeling, any thought that you have. And hey, if you go deep enough, if you follow a trail of consciousness deep enough, you're going to get to its core origin. And what every one of us will find at the core origin of our consciousness is pure love. Try down shadow work enough, no matter how uncomfortable it is, and you'll find love there. So it's a worthwhile thing to do, I think.
So tracing that, it begins like a thought when you're like, you sit in meditation or you're somewhere and you realize you're judging someone really harshly and you're like, oh, what am I doing? And then what does it mean to trace that initial like bit of awareness down to the seed? What's the practice?
Yes. Oh, I love that question. Yes. So my first step that I always use for myself and suggest for other people is to begin by becoming very observant of the negative thought. So in becoming observant, this is very helpful because it creates an automatic, instantaneous space between you and the thought. So that and again, I'm not applying my identity to that anger, to that judgment. That's I'm not my anger in this moment. I'm not my judgment in this moment. I'm the observer that's standing outside of it and observing it, just watching it with equanimity, with a sense of acceptance. I'm seeing it and I'm allowing it to be. I don't need to be attached to it. It's a very powerful step because as soon as we can observe something, then we're already taking our power back because we're not completely identified in the thought or the anger. From there, then you'll notice that the anger or the feeling, the emotion, the judgment will start to change before your eyes. If you can release attachment to it through this observation that you're doing, just watch it and say, I accept you, not trying to stuff you down, not trying to convince you to be something other than you are, not thinking you're an unacceptable thought, so I push you away. Not any of that. Just observe it, let it be, say, okay. Almost validating yourself and just saying, this is a thought, I accept it, I allow it to be. You'll start to notice that thought changing. It's sort of like the weather, like you watch the clouds and you'll start to notice after a while that, gosh, they're moving. They're not, static, they're moving. And you'll start to notice it evolving a little bit. And there's an intelligence inside all of us that we can talk to, that we can converse with at any time we want to. So at that point, once you've gotten to a very neutral observational state and you start to notice that the feeling is even changing, dispersing and moving a little bit, I ask the inner self, ask the heart, where did this come from? Why do you feel the need to feel this way? Where are you coming from? And then just notice where your mind starts to go. Because as we said, there is a wise inner being in all of us that knows exactly where these come from. So in that way, you're starting to take a dive, right? From the conscious mind, where these thoughts, kind of interplay, into the subconscious mind, where we start to see the deeper meaning and the root systems of, oh, I thought this because I have a belief about, let's say, the world that is this way. So I can see now where all these different kinds of thoughts kind of branch out of this one root or this one belief. When we get to the level of beliefs in the subconscious mind, that's where some really powerful stuff starts to happen for us, because our beliefs are the foundation of all the thoughts that we think. And then the thoughts that we think are the foundation of the things that we project and that we experience and attract outside of us in the world. So if we can change the deeper beliefs, not just the surface thoughts, but the deeper beliefs behind the thoughts, then we become a whole different kind of person. You can even ask that inner self, why do I believe that? And then it might tell you exactly why. It might show you a memory from your childhood or a relationship where you learned that belief. And then you'll start to just go deeper and deeper and deeper. Just keep asking questions to that inner self, and it will answer every time.
Yeah, so it's not really a complex process, but to really understand that you do need to experience it. Like right now, this is information people that are watching, like, okay, that's what you do. But when you go and experience it, then you're like, oh, that's why it makes sense.
Yes.
So these tools for awareness then, I guess, that we can get into, these strategies for becoming more aware, I guess, we talk a lot about meditation. What do you think about meditation in the process of becoming aware?
Yes, it is my favorite tool for developing more spiritual awareness and self-awareness in life, because I have found that there's really nothing that rivals, how big a shift we can make through meditation. It is, I think, one of the most powerful tools for awakening spiritual gifts. So awakening that ability to kind of perceive energy, or in other words, to perceive the ways in which everybody's unified and to see how we interplay with all of that. It is a great and powerful tool for getting in touch with the self as well. Because as we know in meditation, a lot of us have this goal of, we want to get to a very still place, or a place in which we can really experience that sense of connectedness and unity, with all. And that's a very peaceful and empowered, kind of place. But in order to get there, there's a road that we kind of have to travel, in that, excuse me, in that we have to go down through the path of our conscious mind, where there are all kinds of thoughts that jump in and out of our mind. We're thinking about the grocery list that we have to make, for later in the day. We're thinking about, some other goal that we have. And, to create and cultivate a sense of discipline that says, I am not these thoughts. They don't have control over me. I get to choose to be still if I want to. To do that, to meditate in that way, is essentially to practice your ability to create spiritually at the plane of spirituality. That is our place for interfacing that and for becoming strong in that ability. In the same way that, an athlete, a great athlete, would probably continue to do core regular exercise kinds of things. It's like, well, if I want to be a great figure skater or something like that, I'm not going to stop doing the kinds of exercises that keep my legs strong, my core strong, my body strong enough to do the kind of athletic work that I'm doing. Meditation, with the level of the mind and spirit, does the same thing. We need a level of discipline that is well practiced in the mind, that teaches us that I have a choice. I can choose what kind of thoughts I put into my mind. And those are very creative choices. And the more we practice meditation, the more instantaneously and powerfully we can find our energy shifting. We can even feel it tangibly through the body sometimes. And that's a very creative thing to do. So to meditate is to tap into our birthright to be co-creators as spiritual beings, really.
Yeah. So meditation essentially is like going to the gym for the mind and the spirit.
Yes. It's such a backbone strength and health, and it just keeping us anchored in that unity stuff. Yeah.
And it becomes like you go to the gym a lot and you feel instant results, like you feel really energized after the gym, but then to see real results long term down the road, you have to keep going. It can't just be a one-off. You have to keep the practice, and
you have to keep the practice. Exactly. It's sort of like, you hear of all these benefits. I love the analogy of going to the gym, because it's like the physical body. Of course, I can imagine that. I can think of it as a physical, actual thing. It's so perfect, because there's so many benefits that are just long term. You digest your food differently. You recover from injuries differently. Your longevity is different. Your energy levels are different. Your sleep-wake cycles are different. It just affects absolutely everything. Meditation is the same kind of overarching power that affects many, many, many areas of life, and relating with the self in ways you might not expect until you start, as you said, to do it regularly like that.
Yeah. So another question then, because we were speaking about the shadow self, and how most of the time when you go to that place to meditate, the first thing you're faced with is something that's not quite nice, something that's quite ugly. I don't know, there's no way I can really describe it, and that's the way a lot of people describe it to me. But one thing that a lot of my clients have been coming up against, and I want to ask you about and perhaps ask the angels about, when they sit in meditation and they close their eyes, and they might be doing like mindfulness, like focusing the breath, or they might be doing some sort of visualization technique, whatever it is, getting flashes of images that are quite, can even be like quite scary or like horrific, like scenes of like gore or really just like dark, negative stuff flashing into their minds. So the question there is this like a separate negative entity coming in to try and block us from doing this sacred work, or is it something in our subconscious mind coming up trying to block us because we don't believe that we don't have the identity of a meditator? What's going on there? Anything about that?
That's such a fascinating topic.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting because depending on the spiritual tradition, I feel like people would use different words to describe exactly what's going on. But no matter what belief system you subscribe to, I think that it's all the same thing. So whether you think to yourself, well, it's like it's a negative entity, it's like this other that's coming in and trying to literally block me from doing what's good for me, then that's almost just as valid as saying, well, it's a piece of ego in my subconscious, it's a piece of fear-based, wounded selfhood that is coming in, and it feels as if it wants to hang on to some kind of real estate in my consciousness. It doesn't want to let go of its real estate of fear that it's holding on to, because like any living being, it doesn't want to die. It wants to preserve itself. So it is coming in and acting almost as if it is an other entity kind of thing. However you want to see it, either way, it's a useful thing to think of. Well, this piece that's coming in, that's creating this sense of distraction or even this sense of fear, like this flashing these images of fear, it's not me. If the thing that's really me is the unchanging self, that kind of flicker or spark of love, that's not your name, not your body, not your identity, not your story, not your thoughts, not any of that stuff, then yeah, that this ego part of us, you could think of it as something separate. No matter what belief system you wish to subscribe to, whether you think of it as an actual, outer entity, which, that is very real and exists, for many people. For those that can't subscribe to a belief system like that, thinking of it as a piece of subconscious mind that is a wounded piece of self. If no matter what belief system you subscribe to, it's something that needs addressing by you, and it is something that can be healed within you. Because think of it this way, we attract like things, right? So even if we want to think of it as, or even if there is a case where it's like there's a person who is actually dealing with an outer spirit that's a lower spiritual entity that's definitely trying to distract them from doing what's good for them, that kind of thing. Well, even in that case, law of attraction would tell us that, well, you've attracted that particular energy into your life for a reason, because you're a vibrational match for it. As we attract any kind of challenge that we receive, whether it's the car accident, the illness, whatever it might be, it's there because we're a vibrational match for it. So if we can change the reason why we're attracting it, or the root behind these kinds of things, then we are healing something great. We are healing something that is both within us and outside of us at the same time. We're healing the whole. Yeah. So I think one of the most important things to do when we're kind of interfacing with real negativity that feels like, oh my gosh, it's like it's pulling me off track. It's almost like there's something outside of me that's trying to pull me off track. There is this, and again, this is in many spiritual practices worldwide, there is this idea that just sort of says, tell it to get out of there. Like immediately say, scat, or get thee behind me, devil, kind of thing. Yeah. Or in like Eastern traditions, like they ring little bells, like get it out. Something that breaks.
What are you doing?
Yeah, it's something that literally will like kind of break the hypnotic spell, send waves or ripples or crackles through the energy around you, and just says, get out of here, scat, go. You don't belong here. Whether you're a thought that's coming from my own ego, whether you're the thought that's coming from someone else that I'm picking up on in the room, whether it's some negative broadcast I'm picking up from anywhere on this earth, whether it's a lower spirit, I don't care what it is. Either way, it does not belong here. It is not worth my time. Get out of here. Get me behind me, kind of thing, is the first appropriate response to that. But then once you've cleared the energy, from there, get back to quiet, get back to peace, get back to stillness, and maybe asking yourself, like, what is it that attracted that now? What is there something in me that is asking for healing? And ask that of that inner wise self, or of the great overarching spirit that is the higher intelligence that connects all of us. Ask God, ask Spirit, now why is that there? Where is the lesson, and what would you like me to do with it? What would you like me to do with this lesson? And once again, going through the very simple process as you described earlier, where you can, just say, okay, self, why, and what must I heal here? And it will tell you right away, okay, I'm seeing something that is fearful because there is some fear inside of me that needs to be purged. And that fear was a vibrational match for whatever it was that pulled me off track in that moment. And that can be very, very helpful to release in that way.
Yeah, I once heard an example of someone when they're faced with this thing that pops in, they kind of gathered it up and chucked it into the sun and just watched it burn up. So there's that worked for them. I'm just watching
That's
it.
great.
Yeah.
I love stuff like that. When I was about 15 years ago, I had diagnosed a depression and anxiety disorder, and I had anxious, thoughts that would be invading my mind all the time. Felt like I wasn't in control of them at all, and I would do that all day long, almost like that was my training, like the athlete doing 100 push-ups a day until they couldn't do it anymore, kind of thing. Like every time there was a negative thought, I made a visualization that I was pulling outside of my consciousness, that it became like a little bubble, like a little floating, glowing melon. I handed it over to the angels, and I watched them throw it up into pure light. And it went right back to source. It turned right back into neutral energy and was completely diffused. And visualizing that way is actually very powerful. It does something very real because it gives a container or space for that energy to flow. So absolutely use visualizations, or use your vocalizations, tell it to go somewhere. Some people like physical motion to do that, moving in such a way, like stretching, or just, shake it out. I've noticed too, this seems to be quite common, but sometimes, people will attract illnesses just in time to purge something that they're purging at the spiritual mental level. Because that illness is not a sign that you're not spiritual and that you're not doing it right and you're not perfect for some reason. There's this unfortunate attitude that I think some people have, where it's like, oh, I've attracted something negative, so it must mean that I failed as a spiritual student, or I did something. No, it didn't. Everyone gets sick. Everybody has little issues. Jesus Christ attracted a crucifixion. The Buddha didn't have to, interview with the Maras just once. It was many times through life. Like, we all are human beings, and we will all experience difficulties no matter who we are. We don't get to stop being human, just because we're on the spiritual path, kind of thing. So when we experience these kinds of things, oftentimes it's for the sake of releasing something in a really powerful way. So thank the challenge, thank the illness, thank the little blockage that comes up in your life, because for some reason it's probably giving you a way to have a more understandable, relatable, tangible means of understanding and releasing this thing that needs to be healed or purged. So a physical illness helps us to do that. An argument with someone we love might help us to do that. It depends what it is, but it gives us a mirror where we have something tangible. In the same way that visualizing, okay, I imagine that I chucked it into the sun, kind of thing. That's a way of giving us a form for something that's kind of nameless and formless at first. So we attract these things outside of us because, for whatever reason, that's part of our mission, and it's good. It's always good. Never reason to feel guilty or like we've messed up.
It's just a kind of reframing the way you're looking at something, like changing the perspective. Like my mom told me when I was really little that when someone's arguing with you, when someone's yelling with you, it's really because they just want to speak to you. So she's like, shift the mindset of like, approach this person, this person really wants to speak to you, they don't know how to, so they're yelling at you. So like, how would you, speak back to that person? Would you yell at them for like wanting to speak to you, or would you just be kind and compassionate? That's a shift in mindset and how these challenges are coming up. So I think that's really important. Yeah.
It's so important. Exactly. I love that as an example of like, we always have a choice in how we relate to the challenge, because you could meet an argument with someone by screaming right back at the person, or you could get calm. You can meet their gaze, take some slow, deep breaths, notice your heart rate calming, and then they will probably get right to the same level with you and start to speak very rationally and so forth. You could get ill and, try to drive yourself, further into your work and ignore your body, and you could get mad at, being ill and, resist it and complain. Or you could take it as a wonderful opportunity, a grateful opportunity to rest and listen to your body and to surround it with love and to sleep as long as it wants and to get to know it better and all of these kinds of things, to receive more love and attention that it might want. So we always have a choice. You're absolutely right. And that reaction is everything. It really shapes how things tend to go, huh?
Yeah, this is real self-love, isn't it? This is the point of it. It's not just, having bubble baths and, I don't know what else self-love is, but this is really it, isn't it?
Totally. Because it's so, like with anything, it's easy to show up and to love when it's pleasant. It's easy to have self-love when you're in the middle of the bubble bath with the glass of wine and the candles all around, and it's like, oh, love, yes, I love myself. This is great. And that's nothing wrong with those experiences. Those are very good for us. We should tank up on as many of those kinds of things as we can. It helps to balance our lives. But it is really powerful self-love, really deeply strengthening self-love when you can love yourself when you are not at your best. When you need tough love, when you need to kick your own ass and say, I need to stand up and take responsibility for the crap that I just created in my life. I need to fix it, and I need to do hard work in order to do it. And I need to be, hold myself accountable, be honest with myself, even if it doesn't feel good, kind of thing. So yeah, that is real unconditional love, is to say, no matter the conditions, I'll still show up for myself and I'll still do my best to take excellent care of myself.
Yeah. And it doesn't need to be this big statement to the world and become like a grandmaster. It's like, a teacher who does this work and then walks into the classroom and brings that gift to all of their students, and then the students go home and take it to their parents, and the parents take it to their workplace, and then it just spreads, doesn't it? It's like you don't know how far a ripple can spread.
Yes.
But is there anything else that we can do when we're kind of faced with that energy that's like lower vibrational? So we're frustrated, we're anxious, we're sad, we're resentful. Things that we can do in our immediate environment, like breathing, grounding. What other tools are really effective?
Yes. Well, the first answer to that, I'm actually kind of feeling angels present for this one. A very simple and sweet message on this. They're saying, just do whatever it takes to take the next step up the ladder into a more positive state of being. So if there's a thought that's available to you, close to your heart, that will make you feel even a little bit better, even if it's not a perfect thought, even if there's still a little bit of ego in it, that's okay. Take that step and go climb up the rung of the ladder. If there's an action that will make you feel good in that moment, whether it's I'm going to call a friend, I'm going to pet my cat, I'm going to, whatever it is, go ahead and do whatever it is that starts to lift you into a higher state. Because the thing about getting into, kind of negative thoughts is that oftentimes it can almost feel as if those negative thoughts have become our reality. It's as if they become the fact of our life or something like that. But the truth is that these thoughts are more like weather patterns. Just because there's clouds in the sky doesn't mean the sun has stopped shining behind them. There is still a reality wherein you can reach clarity, wherein there is support, where there's truth, where there are things that will make you feel good. There is something outside of this negative feeling. So just getting to a little bit more clarity, a little bit more positivity in whatever way makes you feel good will help you to do that. So that's very individualized, but generally there are also some kind of universal ones that really work for us too. And one is to become aware of the body. A lot of times when we get really, really stuck down a negative thought train, we kind of become a little bit disembodied. We start to, trail off all over the place. We become less aware of what's happening in the physical. And it actually helps us to focus on our breath and to notice, oh gosh, my heart rate had really started raising there. It was beating so fast. And then, okay, I can breathe deeply. And now my heart can calm down. Or, oh gosh, my muscles started to tense up and my neck was getting tense. Noticing these things and then relaxing. and doing something for the body that will immediately start to calm and rebalance you. Take a drink of water, stretch, take off your shoes and put your bare feet on the ground. Do something to soothe yourself, take a little nap, something like this, just to change the state first, and then, get down to the work of dealing with whatever that negative, feeling was, not stuffing it down necessarily with some coping mechanisms that's just designed to distract us, but something that soothes the self, that releases it, at least, for a moment. Certainly if you can get to it, because we know that not always can we get into that observational state that we described before, where you're just observing
work.
Sometimes we feel like crap and we just can't do it right away, and that's okay. The Spirit understands that, the angels understand that. So they say that instead, again, calm yourself and soothe yourself first, and then go to that neutral observing. Then take your meditation the next morning, even if you need that, or that night before you fall asleep, and do whatever you can to lighten it up.
I think we speak a lot about the mind influencing the body, which is, it does, but also the body can influence the mind. So, if you're relaxing the muscles, breathing, you can send signals that I guess will activate different vibrations, higher thoughts.
Totally. It's a two-way street. And a lot of times when I'm helping people with any healing goal, I hear the angels so often say things to the tune of, approach it at every level of being at once. So if it's a physical ailment, let's say, sure, take the medicine or do the physical therapy that will help the physical body, but at the same time, also address it at the level of the mind, of the emotions, and of the spirit. Or if it's a mental issue, approach it physically, mentally, spiritually, do it all at once. And then you're approaching the healing from these many angles all at the same time, creating this kind of multi-pronged support that spreads evenly throughout all levels of your being. And it just makes it faster. It expedites it, and you'll feel a little more whole and supported. Yeah.
What about those times, and I don't know if you've ever been through this, and we're all human, but you're faced with a struggle, and then now all of a sudden you've got all these tools and you've got this awareness of how to deal with it and go into the shadow and be aware and approach it with love. But what happens when those thoughts comes up of like, I actually enjoy being the victim? Like, people enjoy being sympathetic towards them, and they almost don't want to heal. It's like a resistance to it, and they actually enjoy the suffering. Why would we do that?
Yes, that kind of goes back to that idea that it's almost like that little that pain body, that little that ego fear self. It's something that has its own desire to proliferate. It's got its own desire to continue to eat up more pain and to feed itself and to live and to have more real estate in your mind and that kind of thing. So the answer to dealing with that kind of thing is first to be aware of it, to say that, again, even though it might feel satisfactory for a moment because it makes me feel powerful almost for a moment. It almost makes us feel like there's some sense of meaning that's swirling around us. The ego's got a sense of meaning swirling around it. To notice, okay, this is not necessarily me. And while maybe there's part of me that really wants to vent for a moment to my friend and complain about all the negative things, or to play the victim for a moment, do it with at least maybe one toe in the water, with the part of you that knows that, hey, this isn't really me. And as soon as possible, I'm going to want to try, if I can, to choose a different path and just step back from that, even if that it does feel really good, or it is really tempting, to follow that victimhood or that complaining or the negativity down that path, just to kind of try stepping outside of it. And a very simple way we can do that is by getting really present. Sometimes just breathing and saying, okay, if it's too hard for me to psychologically convince myself not to think this way and, to think of all the answers, to have all the ideas and the answers, then instead, don't try to logic your way out of it. Just try to feel your way out of it by getting present. By and this is where having that practice of meditation is so helpful, because we're practicing getting present and very still. We're practicing getting into the present moment where we're not attached to our thoughts and that kind of thing, and just notice, just breathe, feel the body, look at the room around you, look at the sky, look at the trees and so forth, and you'll start to become a little bit more still and a little bit more yourself, a little more grounded in the true self, and that kind of present, quiet, kind of place, which really, really, really helps us to no longer feel so almost, I guess, like addicted to that part that loves the feeling of the little zing of power, the seeming power that comes up when we feel, like we're playing the victim kind of thing. And just remind yourself too, that's not where my meaning comes from. My meaning comes from something deeper than that. So
yeah, like we spoke about at the beginning.
Yeah.
Eckhart Tolle does a lot of good work on that. If anyone's more interested in going into it,
Definitely read
amazing.
Part. Yes,
Yeah.
incredible. That stuff is his incredible wheelhouse. Yes,
it's most definitely an open channel for that information to stream through. So
yes.
yeah, but I think we'll leave it there, Sarah, because that was a lot of really good information, and just go back over, read over, take some notes. I just love how simple the practices are. Like it has been for thousands of years, and with like modern spiritual teachers or whatever you want to call people, like they're using the same strategies that we used thousands of years ago because they work. And I guess the effectiveness is how conscious you are when you use the practices. It's not some fancy tools, or you think there's really cool things that you can go do and get healings done. And like you do, the amazing like shamanic journeys and soul retrievals. They're amazing things, but in your day-to-day life, you don't have to be a qualified healer or a Reiki master. You can just breathe and become aware. Yeah, like I said, it's all information right now, but we've got to turn it into experience. Get out there and we'll get practicing. Thanks so much, Sarah.
Yes, thank you so much. It was such a wonderful conversation. I could talk to you all day, so thanks for having me, and I hope we can chat sometime again.